Dr.柯博登from National Kaohsiung Normal University. He has taught English in Taiwan for 18 years, including 12 years of teaching experience in a private elementary school and 6 years of teaching experience in a public elementary school, and 2 years as the director of a private elementary school. And now he is assistant professor in the Department of English of National Kaohsiung Normal University. Today, his topic is preparing teachers to teach in bilingual programs. Let's welcome him.
Thank you very much for that nice, warm introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. Today my topic is preparing teachers for bilingual programs. Now, this is an extremely broad topic, and there's no way that I can get in great detail in only 30 minutes. So today what I'm going to do is try to hit on a few key points that I think are important, and afterwards, of course, if there's a chance for discussion, I'm happy to answer any questions. So basically my target audience today are all of those teachers who are teaching now or will be teachers in the future, or those of us who are training teachers right now. Okay, let me figure out the technology here. There we go, okay. Since time is a bit of an issue, I'm going to jump right to my second one. Okay, so as a teacher trainer at NKNU, one of my jobs is also teaching courses such as teaching methodologies and teaching practicum and other such courses to help prepare teachers for the future. And one of in Kaohsiung anyways, the bilingual programs are kind of just getting started. They're becoming more and more popular there. So that's one of the things that we have to do is help our future teachers get prepared if they end up in these bilingual programs. So first of all, my job when I'm training teachers is to make my students familiar with the programs that are out there. So for example, if I ask my students, you know what CLIL is? They will say, CLIL, maybe I heard that before. How about EMI, or how about STEAM or STEM? Same thing, they're not entirely certain what that means. So as a teacher trainer, of course, it's important to, first of all, let them know what's out there, because when they become teachers, they may end up in one of these programs. So today I'm not going to talk about definitions. You can look that up. That's something that you can learn on your own. And to be honest, everyone has somewhat of a different definition of these programs depending on the school that's running it and what their goals are. But basically what we've got out there is CLIL. Now, my interpretation of CLIL is we're going to focus on content, and we're also going to focus on language. So it's kind of a dual focus. And then we also have EMI programs where English is used as a medium, but maybe we're focused more on teaching content. And then of course we have immersion programs and STEM and STEAM programs out there as well. Okay, now before I get into the key part of my talk, which is preparing teachers for maybe content-based teaching programs, one thing that I like to do with my students is talk about teaching principles. And one thing I encourage my students is try not to look back at how you were taught, but try to think about how you want to be as a teacher in your own classroom, and try to create more of a communicative classroom. Because in the future, as we gear towards being a bilingual country or trilingual country or multilingual country, I should say, we need to use English in more authentic ways in the classroom. We need to create real life uses for English, and communicative-based classrooms will do that. So there are a few principles that I push in my classroom. One of the textbooks that I like to use with my students is a textbook by Brown and Lee, Teaching by Principles. Now, due to time limitations, I'll just briefly go through these. But these are the principles that I find are very important for teachers to promote in their classrooms for these bilingual programs that are running now. And the first one is automaticity. Of course, that's something that I think lacks in classrooms today, is allowing students a chance to use the language enough so that the forms, vocabulary, everything becomes automatic. The second one is transfer. So it's up to the teachers to promote this idea of transfer in the classroom, transferring the students' background knowledge into the classroom to help them learn English more successfully, using what they know about Mandarin or Taiwanese or whatever their native tongue is, and helping to learn English with that. And also dealing with negative transfer, interference, and things like that. The third principle we talk about is reward. Okay, so in classrooms, especially with younger children, there may be more of a desire to use extrinsic motivation, extrinsic rewards, but we try to show our teachers that allowing your students to really learn through intrinsic motivation, intrinsic reward is much more successful for language learning. The fourth one is self-regulation. Of course, once you get to junior high school, senior high school, university level, our students should be independent learners. And that's the teacher's job to instill that in the classroom so that they're regulating their own learning, motivating themselves to learn, realizing how important it is to learn English, not to pass a test, but to use English outside in the real world. Okay, now the fifth principle is identity and investment. So creating this English learning identity in the classroom. Why am I learning English, and what is my new identity as I'm learning, and how invested can I get in my own learning process? Okay, the sixth one is interaction. So of course, all of these principles will tie into the bilingual program, using English in authentic ways, but interaction is very key. A lot of the classes that I've observed in the past, you see a lot of teacher-centered classrooms where the teachers are offering or presenting the material, students are repeating, maybe they practice a little bit, but this idea of interacting in the classroom using authentic forms, authentic language, I think is something that is very key in order to promote successful language learning. Okay, the seventh and eighth, language culture, is just this idea of creating this new culture. Now that you're learning English, you're an English learner, you've created a new culture inside of your classroom. And also learning to be empathetic to speakers of other languages as well. And the last one is agency. Agency is that idea of you are in control of your learning and you are the best learner that you can be. Now these 8 principles are typically used at the beginning of my teaching to teach my students that once you get into the classroom, it doesn't matter if you're in a CLIL classroom, an EMI classroom, STEAM, STEM, it doesn't matter. These principles are very important to promote language learning. Okay, so I'm going to move on now to the main part of my talk, which is content-based teaching. Now, as I said before, we can talk about CLIL, we can talk about EMI, all of these different programs. But in the end, we're using English to teach something different than what's in our regular EFL textbooks. We're teaching content. We're trying to give them more vocabulary or something different that they're not getting from their regular classes. Okay, so just some previous research. Now, I'm not going to go through all these. I don't want to bore you to death and put you to sleep. But there is an overall general pattern with these studies. Now, I've read a lot of different papers on CLIL and EMI, and basically what you'll find is CLIL can improve enjoyment in the classroom. It can increase motivation. It can make them use better learning strategies. There's lots of different positive things that can happen. It can lower anxiety. However, in the end, there's usually 2 areas that can come up. And the first is teacher training. So teacher training can be an issue, especially if you're teaching content. So if you're asking an English teacher to teach science, is that teacher qualified to actually teach the content? And in a lot of studies they've done have shown actually this may not be the case. And the second is it's usually a case of the rich get richer. Those students in your classroom, which I like to call the bushy band superstars, those kids who have their private education outside of the classroom, they succeed in this type of class because they've already got the background vocabulary. However, those low proficient students tend to struggle a lot. And what happens is that, I've killed, oh, there it is. I got too excited. That gap really starts to widen between the high and the low proficient students. So it doesn't matter if it's CLIL or EMI, we seem to have this same thing. You can see in my last one. EMI courses in Taiwan have also shown to create high anxiety situations for students with self-perceived weak proficiency. So how you create your classroom is really important because you don't want it to be a case where, look, we're going to implement this content-based program, it's going to be great, students are going to learn all this vocabulary, but my lower proficient students are going to struggle very badly because they don't have the ability to keep up. Okay, so same with STEM and STEAM. They use STEM and STEAM both in America. They use it for their second language learners. And they have this problem as well. Teacher training, the teacher's qualifications may not match. And second, it's possible that the lower proficient students may struggle a lot. Okay, now I want to talk a little bit about my own research in CLIL and STEAM. And then I'm going to give some suggestions about what I will suggest for my own students if they get into this type of situation. So the first one that I did was last year is a primary school in Kaohsiung. We implemented an 11-week science class into a regular EFL program. So what I mean by that is this particular class, this particular school has 4 English classes per week. And what we did is we borrowed one and turned it into a CLIL class. And our content was science. And what we did is we taught them all about insects, so characteristics of insects, body parts, life cycles, things like that. And we lesson planned using the 4 C's of CLIL, which if you're in this room for the last presentation, we got a very detailed description of the 4 C's, but I'm also going to talk about them in a minute as well. And we also tried to make sure we had a lot of formative assessment on top of the summative as well. And our participants were 118 6th grade students. Okay, so what we found was I gave them a survey at the end of the course, and the survey was broken into 3 major sections. So the first one was enjoyment of having this science class. The second was about motivation to learn English, and the third one was their perceived learning. Now you can see what I did for time's sakes. I know I didn't have time to go through all the details, but I just kind of lumped them together into a group average. So the enjoyment levels were very high. About 90% of the students enjoyed having this kind of class, something different from their regular English class. Motivation to learn English in the future was also pretty high, 85%. The lowest one was perceived learning. Now this one was about 81%, but most of the students who selected a low opinion of their perceived learning, of course, were the lower proficient students. Now their perceived learning actually didn't really match the reality of how well they did. So if you can follow along on the left-hand side, the spelling is dark blue. There's a spelling section on their pre and post test, and then there was a content section, and then the yellow is the total score. So you can see in the pre-test section, the scores were very low. So we purposely chose scientific words that they had never learned before. I was in collaboration with the English teacher in the classroom, and we chose that content that they'd never ever seen before. And you can tell by the post-test, this was after 6 weeks of learning, the scores were much higher. And then what I did is after 5 weeks, the course was over, we gave them a delayed post-test. And actually we totally changed the test, we made it a little bit harder, but the content was the same. And the scores were still quite high. Even the lower proficient students were still able to pass the content section. Okay, now one that I'm working on right now is a STEAM program also in elementary school. And this one is going to be longer term, it's going to be the entire school year. And this one is theme and topic based. Now this ties into those teachers who are running this kind of bilingual program where they're not given their own materials. Maybe they need to create their own themes or topics. So what we've done is we've decided to choose 4 major themes. The first one is living things, and then the second one will be distance and speed. And then what we do is we create these lesson plans that have a balanced connection to STEAM. So if you're not familiar with STEAM, that's science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. And we try to have a balance between all of the different subjects, of course, using English. Now, target English vocabulary and structures are also stressed, so it's not just content-based, it's also language-based as well. And the participants are approximately 115 fifth grade students. So this is another program that we're running. Now, what I will do when I'm training my students is take these concepts of these programs I'm running and try to show them how to create their own lesson plans, create their own teaching materials. Now, as a teacher, when you go into the classroom, when you go into your school, basically there will be 3 options of where your teaching materials are going to come from. Obviously, you could have school purchased textbooks, everything's made for you, bought, it works great, here you go, teach your class. The second type is maybe the school provide you with some materials that they have created already. Remember, I'm talking about bilingual programs. I'm not talking about the regular English class. Or the third, which I've run into a lot, is that the teacher is responsible for making their own materials. Now, this can be a real struggle. I've been to schools where they were told, here you go, I want you to teach, I want you to match it to the Chinese content, go. And the teachers are basically told to translate the material, they have to come up with their own vocabulary, sentence structures, and it's been hours and hours and hours in discussion with their co-teacher, maybe they have a foreign teacher in the classroom as well. So I notice what a struggle it is, and the thing is, if you're doing it this way, you could run into a lot of problems. Maybe there's not a nice direct path to language learning for the students. Okay, so these are some recommendations that I have, especially for creating curriculums or syllabus, or even just your weekly lesson plans. And the first is to adopt the 4 C's of CLIL. It doesn't matter if you're teaching CLIL or not. I found this very useful in my own classrooms to adopt these. Now, without getting into great detail, the first one is content. Of course, content is the easiest part, right? Are you going to teach science? Are you going to teach math? Are you going to teach social studies? Maybe you have to follow the content of the textbook that the Chinese class is using. Now, the second is cognition. Cognition, very simply, is selecting thinking skills that connect the content together. So after you've chosen your content, you have to ask yourself, what kind of thinking skills do I want my students to do? Do I want them to compare and contrast? Do I want them to predict? Do I want them to create something new based on what they've learned? These two need to connect together. And then the third one, of course, is communication, and this is the most important one for me, because this is the language they need to use and to be able to, they need to be able to use in order to successfully learn the content, but not only learn the content, to use it in a way that they can communicate with their classmates, communicate with their teachers. It needs to link the content and the cognition together. And a lot of the programs that I've seen or classrooms that I've been in, this is the area where it gets tricky, because I will see some random sentences that actually the students have never learned before, or maybe they're not carried over from previous lessons. So some thought needs to go into this section. And then, of course, culture. When we're talking about culture, of course, it's not just festivals and things like that. Okay, we're going to talk about America, so that means we're going to do Christmas. Yes, that's fun for students, but culture also means being what's called pluricultural, which is being empathetic for people from around the world. If you're teaching about living things, insects, animals, what is their value to society? Why are animals important? And other things like that. It's not just about, like I said, Halloween and Christmas, although they're fun. Okay, so on top of this, I also strongly recommend for my students and for teachers that you adopt the idea of 2 different types of language, especially if your focus is not only content. If you are also focused on language, you should separate the language into what's called content obligatory language and content compatible language. Now, what I mean by that is content obligatory language is that essential language for learning the content. These are the words, the structures they've never learned before, and this is something that's new. But the content compatible language, this is the language that supports the lesson. So these are the structures, maybe the words that they've already learned before in the past. and they are going to assist the students in their communication. Okay, now I'm going to give some examples. So here's an example lesson plan that I've done in the past, and this is CLIL based. So you can see over on the left, you got the time and the task. These are just common features of any lesson plan materials. But then I've got my content obligatory and content compatible section for each part of the lesson plan. So you can see this one was an insect lesson. So we've got words like insect, thorax, abdomen, singular antenna, and plural antennae. So we're teaching the students something they've never ever seen before. And then of course the content compatible language, legs and head, they've already learned that, as well as an insect has 6 legs. This is the sentence structure that they're going to use over and over and over again through this lesson. Okay, so you can see for each part of the lesson plan, maybe there is new content obligatory language and maybe not. And in this way, when you're creating your lesson plans, future lesson plans, you will start to carry over the content obligatory language into your content compatible language, so that as you move on to new topics, you are allowing the students to repeat these forms over and over again. Okay, and then at the bottom of my lesson plan, here are my 4 C's, okay? So not only did I do the 2 types of language, but the 4 C's underneath it. So each single lesson, we're gonna add these 4 C's in there, and that will make your lesson complete for your students. That way it's not just about learning vocabulary and repeating after me. It's about really embracing that idea that the 12-year curriculum guidelines are trying to promote of a lifelong learner using real-life scenarios. Okay, I know I'm going to run out of time soon, so I'm going to jump on. Here's a couple pictures. So here's a presentation of the content obligatory language. This is for 6th grade students. And of course, it's best to offer some hands-on learning as well in the classroom. This will definitely help the students to acquire those forms and vocabulary that you're trying to teach them. Okay, I'm going to skip over to the next one. Now, another one that I will offer to my students is STEAM-based type of idea. And what I mean by that is having them focus on different types of content or different types of learning areas within one big topic. So for example, this is a lesson that actually I just did recently with some 5th grade students on distance and speed. So you can see here we're introducing speed and distance. It's the first class materials. Here's the key vocabulary that I want them to learn, and this is the structure that I want them to learn. And then of course we'll have some formative assessment. Now the purpose of this topic is we want them to learn not only what speed and distance mean, but also how to use it in their real life. So for example, the topic before was on living things. So we talked about animals. So we talked about cheetah is the fastest animal on land. And then we showed them a cheetah runs 130 kilometers per hour. And the kids say, wow. And I say, okay, so how far in Taiwan is 130 kilometers? Taipei. See, from Kaohsiung to Taipei is not 130. Kending. They have no idea how far that really is. So then what we do is we take out Google Maps and we start to draw lines on Google Map on the screen, and we give them this sense of how far it is. And then of course we let the students go outside and run, and we measure their speed, and then we compare them to animals, and we draw lines on Google Map to show how far they can run in an hour. And we try to make this more of an authentic learning situation. Okay, so on top of my STEAM-based lesson plan, every single week I will write these 5 areas down: science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. So you can see for this lesson, I've got a science connection, a technology connection, and a math connection. I don't have engineering and arts, so maybe next week I will try to mix that up a little bit. Now, sorry, I think I have a couple pictures here. So here we are doing the speed. So you can see, it's hard to read there, but it says, are you faster than a pig? And then the students laugh and think that's pretty funny. But then we're actually going to measure and see, are they really faster than a pig, by seeing what their speed is. Now, throughout all of this, the reason that I talk about CLIL and this content obligatory and content compatible language is, you can't just throw in a content-based program and expect it to succeed. So what I mean by that is you can't just say, okay, we're going to teach social studies. Here's the content. We're going to present it to the students. And then, yes, maybe they improve their listening. Maybe they improve their reading. But they also need to be able to use the language. And this is where the teacher is really important. You have to give them those opportunities to use the language authentically. It can't just be listen and repeat, and then move on to the next topic. Okay, so here is, in this particular class, actually, we're supposed to have some iPads where the students can do online reading, and then we're going to have some kind of quiz afterwards. But our iPads hadn't showed up yet, so we recreated Kahoot by giving them colored papers and putting the color on the screen with the questions. So I think I have about a minute or two left. So I thought I would just share an example of us trying to recreate this in the classroom. Big cup. Present. Bring full. Skin. And it is hurt. Okay, so this one's not so easy. So let's start with skin. What's skin? Okay, so this is my skin, okay? Now listen. Top skin. Top means my skin. Okay, I'm going to jump ahead a little bit. So we read the story online using Epic Online Reading. And then at the end of the story, I wanted to give them some reading comprehension questions. Okay, so here we go. Wrinkle skin. Ran an elephant, blue a bat, green teacher curtain. Ready? 3, 2, 1, up. Shell. We already said this word in Chinese. Red a blue whale, blue a panda, green and armadillo. 3, 2, 1. Good job. Good job, Ian. Okay, so just to share a little bit of what we're doing in the classroom. So I know I'm out of time. I have more, I see, thank you. I do have a few more topics to talk about. One would be whether or not they're going to be co-teaching in the classroom, because that is something that seems to be more and more of a trend, and maybe that will be co-teaching with a foreign teacher like myself, or maybe it will be with the content and language teacher together. So those are other topics that we will discuss in class, as well as using whole English in the classroom versus using some Mandarin and some English, and what are the benefits of both types. And then I guess that's it, because I'm going to get pulled off the stage. But in the end, I guess the main thing that I'm trying to pass on to my students is that when they get into these bilingual programs, they need to have a really clear plan of what their purpose is in the classroom. And their purpose is to create this kind of communicative atmosphere where students can use the language in a way to really to benefit the acquisition of it, not just maybe simplifying it into listen, repeat, teacher-centered, something a little bit more interactive. And this idea of content-based teaching, in my opinion, is a really great way to do it, because not only is it more interesting for the students, but they're learning vocabulary that they wouldn't otherwise learn, and that will also help them on exams in the future as well. Okay, thank you very much for your attention, everyone.
Such a very wonderful and informative sharing, very organized, and also he has provided us abundance of experience sharing. Really appreciate you, Dr. Bolden, and we hope that next time we will have some opportunity to invite Dr. Bolden again to share us more topics related to the education. Thank you. And now, because of time limit, we really don't have the time for the Q&A. But hopefully, after this session, we can have some communication or interaction with Dr. Bolden after this session. And now, I would like to present Dr. Bolden appreciation.
现在我们要致赠感谢状给柯教授，请主持人黄院长致赠感谢状。Now we would like to invite moderator Ding Chuang to present a certificate of appreciation to the speaker.
接下来，请各位稍作休息。